I honestly didn't know what to expect when sitting down to watch Megalopolis. The trailers didn't lay out much of a story, and all I really knew was that Francis Ford Coppola was behind it, and was more the kind of movie that's designed to get the film festival crowd clapping like seals, rather than putting butts in seats in the theaters. Once the end credits rolled, however, I did have one crystal clear thought prominent above all the others in my mind. What the fuck did I just watch? Megalopolis is a gaudy, pretentious, indulgent, overstuffed, directionless Hollywood circle jerk that barely qualifies as a movie. The subtitle of Megalopolis labels this story as a fable, but it's more like a quaalude-fueled fever dream that Coppola's been hanging on to since the 1980s. It's an ode to one aging filmmaker's hubris and nothing more. Now we're going to do the typical breakdown, then review portions of the video that I always do. But saying this movie has a coherent story is being too generous. So I guess I'll just tell you some things that happened in Megalopolis, and I'll leave it up to you to form the story. So, spoilers ahead, but I'm not sure this is even spoilable. Megalopolis takes us to New Rome, the capital of this fairy tale's American empire. But, it's just New York City. The world of Megalopolis is a weird blend of ancient Roman decorum and society, and modern-day shameless degeneracy. The movie begins by posing a question to the audience. When does an empire die? Does it collapse in one terrible moment? No. But there comes a time when its people no longer believe in it. And this is the closest this movie ever comes to being coherent. At the forefront of New Rome is Caesar Catalina, the troubled visionary builder and inventor who's created the magical building material Megalon. He's played by Kylo Ren and part of the powerful and wealthy Crassus family, which is headed by his uncle Hamilton Crassus, played by Jon Voight. Standing in opposition to Caesar is Mayor Cicero, who thinks Caesar's vision for the city and for the future is reckless. Caesar's cousin Claudio, played by Shia freaking LaBeouf, also seeks to undermine Caesar, a motive born of nothing more than jealousy. Aubrey Plaza plays Wow Platinum, a TMZ-style reporter named after dish soap, and she has some fling with Caesar before eventually marrying his uncle Hamilton. Although the mayor is in a heated rivalry with Caesar for the people's minds and hearts, his own daughter Julia becomes enamored with Caesar and the two grow close. Okay, and here is where we need to take a quick break for a programming note. Now that you have some background on the world and the characters we're dealing with, we'll go over the rest of the story. But again, it's not really a story, it's more like a loose collection of things that happen. So I'm going to list some of those events in chronological order, but it's up to you to try and make sense of all of them. So after Caesar gets closer with Julia, Wow Platinum and Hamilton get married, and the circus put on in their honor is interrupted by a sex tape featuring a famous singer who touts her state-enforced virginity, and somehow this is Caesar's fault. And meanwhile, Caesar is off doing every drug within reach. He gets arrested, and although he's cleared of any wrongdoing, he's lost his powers. Oh, by the way, Caesar randomly has superpowers that he can use to stop and manipulate time, and no, this is never explained. With Julia in his life, Caesar is now working better than ever, and voila, his powers come back. But an old Soviet satellite falls out of orbit and crashes down on the city, and I guess this inconvenienced someone somewhere, but the rest of the story just chugs along undeterred. Caesar gets Julia pregnant, so he has her parents over for poker, and her dad, the mayor, doesn't take the news well. Meanwhile, Caesar's cousin Claudio is running for some office, who knows which. Mayor Cicero stops by Caesar's place to offer him evidence that clears Caesar from suspicion in the case of his dead, missing first wife, which is a subplot that wasn't even worth mentioning, in exchange for leaving his daughter Julia alone. Then after Megalon is deemed dangerous, Caesar gets assassinated, but the Megalon is able to save his life. Then Claudio and Wow Platinum push Hamilton Crassus out as CEO of his megabank and take control over it. But then old Crassus kills Wow Platinum with a bow and arrow and shoots Claudio twice in the ass. Then Caesar finally opens his Megalopolis project, which is basically just an Alice in Wonderland theme park, which is supposed to save humanity somehow. Meanwhile, the mob turns on Claudio. And then it all ends with a voiceover of some pro-communist rewriting of the Pledge of Allegiance, and the movie ends. I truly would have liked to tell you more about this movie's story, but this is what they gave us. Beyond the actual events that I just mentioned, I think to give this movie justice in a review, you need to know some of the quotes found in Megalopolis, and the extremely odd things that happened in the film. just so you can get a fuller picture of the absolute absurdity this movie tried to pass off as art. So as if the dialogue wasn't bizarre enough, there are some batshit crazy lines in this one. You had Aubrey Plaza on her knees in front of Caesar when she busted out the phrase, "You're anal as hell. Meanwhile, I'm oral as hell." Not to be outdone, Jon Voight later delivers, "What do you think about this boner?" which he soon followed up with, "You Wall Street slut, this is your closing bell." Those weird moments of dialogue weren't it though. They often accompanied equally surreal events playing out on screen. Shortly after Jon Voight said boner and Wall Street slut in the span of 30 seconds, he shot an arrow into Shia LaBeouf's asshole. Caesar and Julia got married in the backseat of his coupe with Morpheus officiating the ceremony. And who could forget Shia LaBeouf cross-dressing? Or some chick stroking Caesar's nipple? Or Aubrey Plaza sitting on Shia LaBeouf's face? And I promise you, there's a ton more insane lines and wacky scenes not mentioned here. So obviously this movie is getting a hate watch label. Let's get that out of the way. Now, it's hard to draw comparisons between Megalopolis and other movies, mostly because other movies tend to have a story and a point. But if I had to think of some comparisons, I'd say Megalopolis is like a mix between The Wizard of Oz and The Great Gatsby, and like, Idiocracy. Just without the charm of Oz or Gatsby, and none of the humor of Idiocracy. I'm not even sure what this movie was supposed to be, or even what the message was. You run out of head to scratch by the time the credits are rolling trying to figure any of this out. I have to assume that the name Megalopolis in this instance is derived from the word Megalomaniac, as the movie makes mention of indulging the greed of ambitious men. But the term applies to Francis Ford Coppola more so than any of the characters in the film, given that he thought he could pass off this indulgent dog shit on film as a movie, and expect people to pay for it. All of the characters are just off-the-wall batshit insane. It's like they just told each actor to come in and act as bizarre as possible for a few hours while they filmed them. From repeating lines 3 times to spastic outbursts in the middle of speeches, it's just weird. And for the record, there's no evidence that Shia LaBeouf knew he was being filmed for a movie. I think this is just who he is now. The movie tries to put forth some deep philosophical points here and there, but it never goes anywhere, and the attempts end up being reduced to just empty quotes as the movie never comes close to making a cogent point. Speaking of not having a point, this 2-hour, 15-minute movie makes it just seconds short of the 2-hour mark before the main thrust of the film that the creator would consider a story becomes clear. It ends up being Claudio's efforts to stop Caesar, something that you could not identify as the main storyline any sooner than 15 minutes before the credits roll. You're not likely to care when this happens anyway, as the movie devolves into complete nonsense around the halfway mark. They even had Morpheus narrating almost the entire movie, just doing exposition dumps the whole way through in the hopes that this will help you follow along with the fever dream you're watching. But it ends up being a fruitless venture with something so directionless. I can understand this being a pet project for someone like Coppola who maybe wanted to play around with some zany ideas on film, but keep it to yourself, dude. No one in their right mind should put a movie like Megalopolis out there for public viewing. As for how the movie is doing, it's getting a 34% from viewers on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think even that is being bolstered by fake reviews and people pretending they get the movie. Even the critics, who this movie was made for at 49%, can't even say this movie was palatable. Even worse than that, this self-financed movie that cost $120 million pulled in $4 million over its opening weekend. Not only is that hilariously bad, but it also allows us to dub this movie Mega-Flopolis, and I mean, come on. Coppola was just begging for it with that title. This movie is just an absolute mess, parading itself as some theatrical, artsy exploration of the philosophical underpinnings of empire collapse. To that end, to Megalopolis, all I'd say is,
at no point were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Do not waste your money, do not waste your time. Just point and laugh with us from a distance as this dumpster fire roars on. Did you watch Megalopolis? If so, how long was it before the thought, "What the hell is this?" crossed your mind? Do you think you could film a better movie with just the money you'd spend on a ticket to see this utter crap? Let us know in the comments below. Also remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to HateWatchers for reviews of other current shows and movies. Thank you for putting the Cope in Francis Ford Coppola with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.